Beyond the Badge is brought to you by the Edina Crime Prevention Fund.
Welcome to Beyond the Badge, a program about the inner workings of the Edina Police and Fire Departments. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sergeant Brian Hubbard. Every year, more than 350,000 house fires occur in this country, taking the lives of more than 2,500 people. Home fires account for 8 out of 10 fire deaths, in part because they often happen at night when people are typically sleeping and vulnerable. Because fire sprinklers are the most effective way to combat fire-related deaths, Administrative Law Judge Eric Lippman ruled that the Department of Labor and Industry has the power to require sprinklers in some new homes. Since January 24th, the building code now requires home builders in most of the state to install automatic fire sprinklers in new single-family houses larger than 4,500 square feet. Coupled with fire alarms, the installation of fire sprinklers in the home reduces the risk of death by 82% compared to having neither.
When a contractor applies for a permit, for a building permit, we are going to look at the square footage of the home and verify the size. And then at that time, we'll be asking about pipe size in the street, things we need to do to verify it's going to be there's adequate water coming into the house domestically so it can supply the sprinkler system. So,
the issue of whether or not to mandate sprinkler installation in residential homes has been an ongoing debate for several years. Lawmakers ultimately sided with fire officials who argued the rule would save lives and lessen property damage. It's easy for Minnesotans to get complacent about the dangers of winter weather, given the frequency of cold temps and dangerous wind chills here. But it's also easy to fall victim to frostbite or even hypothermia if exposed to the elements for too long without proper clothing or gear. Let's join Police Sergeant Aaron White and Fire Lieutenant Sean White to talk about winter weather hazards, safety, and preparation.
Thank you, Brian. I'm out at Edina City Hall, and today we're going to talk about something that I think all Minnesotans are pretty good at talking about, and that's the weather. I'm joined by Lieutenant Sean White from the Fire Department to talk about the weather, sort of.
Yes, sir.
You're pretty good at talking about the weather, I assume. It's kind of part of life around
absolutely.
here.
Something we all have to deal with,
Right.
I think.
Well, specifically, we're going to talk about cold weather and related hazards. We're pretty lucky. It's been kind of a mild winter in Minnesota.
So far.
I was talking to somebody in the deep south, though, the other day, and they were laughing at me that I thought it was warm when it was in the 30s. The reality is we live in a cold climate.
Absolutely. And there's, I think, dangers we recognize even when we think it's warm out or warmer than normal. We can still run into a lot of trouble if we're not appropriately prepared.
So tell me about our biggest concerns with cold weather. What do we need to be prepared for?
I think really getting ready and protecting yourself from some of the cold weather injuries such as hypothermia, frostbite, and that's really about just making sure you're wearing the appropriate type of clothing, thinking ahead, and having some protection in place in case something does go wrong.
And it's cold isn't the only factor. It's really a factor of time as well. I mean, we could get hypothermia in the 50s, let alone when it's really cold out.
Absolutely, a combination of all of it. You know, the colder it is, the shorter the time frame. You know, for both hypothermia as well as frostbite, exposed skin. You know, the wind as well as water. So any kind of moisture significantly increases the risks.
Okay. How about some recommendations? What's the best way to prepare?
I think really just understanding what's going on with the weather, what's going on outside, preparing specifically for that, and for what could happen. So for example, I always run into this problem with my kids. They're like, we're just jumping in the car, we're running up to the store, I don't need, a sweatshirt will be fine. But it's only 10 degrees out. We need to make sure we always have what it is we might need in the car. Kind of having your own winter emergency kit in your house, just like you would have a survival kit set up at your own, in your home, in your car, you'd want an emergency survival kit. And really that's about having extra layers of clothing, blankets, so maybe more mittens, sweatshirts, things like that are definitely gonna keep you warm. And then I think what people really overlook is during the cold, dehydration can be just as big of a concern as it can be in the warm months. So making sure you have water, definitely food, you know, trail mix, energy, protein bars, things like that are great.
You brought up a really good point with kids. Here in Edina, common scene is the kids playing for hours and hours on the ice rink. They're getting warm, maybe even sweating a little bit. Absolutely. How do we get our kids prepared for that condition, you know, kind of exerting themselves and being out on the ice rink for a number of hours?
And I think as long as we're staying active, you know, you're relatively safe. But like you said, once you start getting sweaty and your clothes are getting wet, now that significantly increases your the risk of losing heat. in your body. So once you have wet clothing, the conduction significantly increases by 5-fold through wet clothing as dry clothing. So,
Okay, we didn't listen to the first half of the interview. We're not prepared. Okay, now I've got some hypothermia going on right now.
news.
Actually,
Bad news.
It's happening to me.
It is.
What are some of the warning signs other than me?
Sure. So, normal reaction is going to be shivering. When we get cold, we know that, okay? If that ever gets to the point where that starts stopping, that's a huge, huge red flag and concern. But much milder than that, you can start to be a little confused. Your speech can change a little bit. You'll lose some of your strength, your fine motor skills and stuff, because your blood is pumping away from the extremities. So at that point, you really need to think about getting yourself to a safer place.
And what about frostbite?
Well, frostbite is the actual freezing of the skin. And so we commonly think about it with our toes or our fingers, because that's far more common and you're more susceptible just because of the types of clothing we wear, but it can really be anywhere on your face. So any exposed skin does need to be covered. And what's happening is the tissue is actually freezing, the blood is shunting away, and so there's significant long-term damage that can come of that.
And final thought on this, when does it become an emergency? When does it go to the next level where we need some medical help?
Absolutely. So you start recognizing signs of frostbite. That's something that absolutely needs further care. So it's not just kind of numbness or tingling, but actual loss of sensation, changing color of the skin, those types of things. More specifically, when we talked about lack of shivering or when that stops, mental status changes, which basically means people start acting differently, having some confusion, aren't acting like they normally would. Those are all big red flags, things that need to be addressed.
Well, better safe than sorry.
Absolutely.
Stay warm. Try to avoid these things. But if all else fails, call you and your partners at the fire department.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for talking weather with me today, Sean. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
That's Lieutenant Sean White with the Edina Fire Department, and we'll return to you, Brian.
Thank you, Aaron. Every month, Edina police officers focus their efforts on a specific statutory violation in order to foster awareness among the public and encourage compliance. This month's focus-in topic is one of the most prevalent and under-enforced traffic violations, the failure to signal a turn or lane change. Although this type of carelessness rarely poses a safety risk to the driver, the failure to indicate a turn or a lane change has the potential to cause confusion and accidents among other motorists on the road. Please be a respectful driver to your fellow motorists by using your turn signals when appropriate. On behalf of the City of Edina's Public Safety Team, thanks for tuning in to learn a little bit more of what goes on beyond the badge. Until next time, stay safe.